Hello and welcome to the Nicole Murphy podcast. Today on this Instagram live episode, I have Laura Matsue joining me. She's a psychospiritual coach and has a podcast with her husband, Bernard Gunter, called The Cosmic Matrix. It is fascinating. She's been speaking out about what's been taking place in the world. Her account is majorly censored, and I couldn't even tag her in what was going on here. I think I just saw her join here. I'm going to invite them live. Guys, I'm
Oh,
really excited for
hey,
this.
how's it going?
Hello,
I'm so
Laura.
glad it worked. Okay, there we go.
Me too. I was kind of like, okay, we need a plan B just in case
I
you
didn't know
literally are not
actually
allowed to join.
because like as you mentioned in your little intro, like people literally get shadow banned now for sharing my content, which is so crazy. So I didn't even know if I could join live or like they've taken away all sorts of things on my account. So I'm glad it worked. So
Yeah, and I shared yesterday because you did a really good breakdown of like showing, like, this is how you can tell I'm shadow banned. Look at the audience I'm reaching that doesn't follow me versus
yeah,
does, and
yeah,
how it
it's
used to be.
crazy. Yeah, we it's
It
actually
is.
I made the analogy to my husband the other day that just imagine we live in a communist country, which we kind of do at this point in a world, and they just hypothetically say that they were like, the Beatles are evil, they're anti-communism, we need to get rid of them. And so they banned the Beatles from touring that country. So that would be one step. But now we're at the point where they're like literally banning people for sharing certain memes and music like me. So, you know, it's a really just crazy world to live in because I was a meditation teacher originally. I was a meditation and yoga teacher and holistic coach, just kind of living my life. And then 2020 hit, and you know, my own conscience was like, oh, we got to stop this, we got to speak out and say something, you know. I was also seeing so many of my friends not saying anything, and I was just like, this is wrong, like this is crazy. I don't want to take a vaccine to go to a grocery store or whatever, or go to a restaurant. So I was really outspoken. It was really hard, you know, on me. It was hard on my nervous system. It was stressful, you know, we got canceled and whatever. And, you know, I'm still dealing with the aftermath now, even though I don't talk about anything and I don't explicitly say stuff, but I make memes. And what I'm learning is they find the memes to be very dangerous. So, you know, that's how you can kind of tell we're in this information war right now.
Yeah, I love that. And it's funny because I've shared your memes. I know other people have, and your quotes, and they've gone around because you have this depth to you. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. Um, how do you think people start to discern truth versus lies?
Yeah.
I know it's a big, big question, but that's what people are coming to.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I
that's what
honestly,
they're
you know,
struggling with.
critical thinking is like a 3D level of it. So that's a huge part of it. Actually, I wasn't so great at critical thinking until I married my husband, who's an Aquarius, and he's like an amazing critical thinker. And he taught me a lot even before this all happened. So that's one part of it. But then there's the spiritual and psychological aspect. And that's actually what we go into in our work is that if you are comfortable and really skilled at lying to yourself, which we all are to some extent, then you will also be more vulnerable to the lies in the world, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that's like just a black and white rule. I'm just saying that really is an inside job, because the more that we can detect the lies within ourselves, the more we're connected to conscience, basically. That will be our guidance system, you know, and the lies to the self are something that we learn to uncover through sincere inner work. And then we become better at doing it in the world. Like I practice astrology, and this all has to do with the Scorpio archetype, which I actually have a lot of planets in. So like the Scorpio archetype is about psychology, depth psychology, digging deep, finding you know, the darkness in the world, doing the shadow work. There's many different manifestations. So if we want to kind of pierce through the veils, we actually have to become skilled at doing that in our own lives. There's no other way, because intellectually, like the mind is such a trickster, and mentally, like the most common defense mechanism that people have is rationalization, which is their mind just rationalizes a story on why they're in this shitty job, why they're in this shitty relationship, whatever. The mind can make up a million different reasons why, but you can't lie to the conscience. So I think it's really about, you know, connecting to that deeper part of yourself, actually. And that doesn't come overnight. That takes work.
Yeah, and you kind of gave some examples of where people self-deceive, but do you think there's like common areas, and how do you know, let's say, when you're in self-deception or when you just want to run away from an in-depth
Yeah,
experience?
can you just
Like
give
the
me like an
job or the
example of
relationship.
that?
So like if you're in a job or in a relationship or in
Mhm.
an experience with your family, we also want to run away from dealing with the
Yeah.
triggers and the depth at times. So how do we know when we're self-deceiving by staying somewhere versus
Yeah,
self-deceiving by
I mean,
not
it is really a
leaving?
question of conscience, which I think, is almost like this still voice within you. It's like a moral compass, actually. And you have to be connected to your heart to get to it. You have to have stilled your mind enough to be able to listen to it, because you never really know. Like, I think for a lot of people, especially in the relationship topic, like I have a very optimistic view in relationships, more so than a lot of other people, even my husband, in that I see, there's a lot of splitting in relationships right now. It's crazy how many people are breaking up. It's been happening for the past couple years. But it's also, we have to also look at what we bring to the table in our relationships. Like, you always want to really examine your part before you go blaming your partner in the relationship example, for example, because usually the lies to the self involve a lack of responsibility. It's someone else's fault. So that's the first place to look. And like, I mean, sometimes you don't get the answer right away. Like if someone wants to, in a relationship, for example, and they don't know, oh, am I running away because I don't want to deal with this issue? Or am I running away because this is not the right relationship for me? You really have to sit down and be like, what are my values? What's most important to me in life? What's my vision in life? And does this person match like where I want to go? And really think about it long term, because relationships are like go through all sorts of cycles and seasons and all sorts of stuff. And they're hard, actually. Like my husband and I, we've been married for I think close to 4 years now, in a conscious relationship where we talk about our shadow and talk about our triggers. And it's the change that happens in our relationship is really high, and it's not easy, and it's not for everyone. So you really got to get clear on what you want and whether this relationship is right for you, at least in that example.
I love that. So let's chat. Can you break down kind of the difference between intuition, gut, and
Trauma response.
and I think you had one other
Yeah,
thing. Yeah.
Well, okay. So there's this is actually Gabor Mate's theory, or he may have got it from someone else. I learned it in his program. So, and I agree with it. So gut feeling is just dangerous or not dangerous. And a trauma response is usually coming from a dysregulated nervous system. It usually jumps to the worst case scenarios. It usually tends to catastrophize. So like, this is the terrible thing that's going to happen next. It tends to have a lack of response flexibility. So something happens and there's only one interpretation that you have for that, and it has to be that way and it can't be other way. It's very rigid thinking, actually. And intuition, I think that, I think that intuition is underneath there, under the surface for most people, but it gets clouded up with all that other stuff. So it's kind of hard to tune into. And since it gets clouded in by all the other stuff, we actually perceive strong emotions as intuition. Strong emotions are not intuition. We perceive our trauma responses as intuition. That's also not intuition, because intuition is actually, I feel like intuition and conscience are highly linked, because you can have an intuitive feeling about something that's kind of coming from your conscience as well, but it's a very quiet knowing. It's not urgent. It's also very flexible and open. It's not like this is the way it is and it can't be other way. That's a trauma response. And I really think, nervous system regulation is actually the key to intuition, because if you're in a dysregulated state, so if you're in fight, flight, or freeze, then your intuition is going to be super clouded by all of that activation, basically. So intuition is kind of like the sky behind all of the clouds of our emotions, of our things that we're thinking about. So I actually think the best way to tune into intuition is actually to have some sort of spiritual practice, like whether that's meditation or yoga or qigong or spending time in nature. Anything where you can relax your nervous system and still your mind is a prerequisite for that.
That's such a beautiful way to explain it, because agreed, there's often we have these strong emotional responses
Yeah.
that are like fear driven, and we're like, my
Mhm.
intuition's telling me I have to move. My
Yeah,
intuition's
yeah.
telling me I've got to do this thing.
And that can
And
actually more be like a
like
gut
as you said,
feeling, like, what I mentioned, dangerous or not dangerous, is that I see a lot of people had to move in the past couple years, especially because it was true that where they were living was dangerous. Like even where we live, we moved from California to Arizona. And when we left, there was literally like military trucks in the street. They were blocking down the freeway. We had to drive through all of these like boarded up buildings, people wearing masks everywhere. We had to like wait for hours to go into a Whole Foods. The food was like, so if you have a fear-based feeling in that, that's totally natural because you are in a dangerous situation. It's the fact, So I think that that's kind of like where it gets tricky, because especially, I consider like we are in World War III right now, except it's a psychological war. But since it's a psychological war, one of the main things that they work with is trauma and work getting people into fear and fight, flight, and freeze, etc. So we have to really understand our psyches. But the point I was going to make is that war tends to displace people for generations. Like my family was in World War II in Canada. They got displaced from where they were. They had to move to a different province. My husband's family was also in Germany in World War II. They got displaced. His whole family is scattered all over. So this is a really common generational trauma that happens from war, which I think is actually what we're seeing now with everyone moving as well.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, my Oma was in World War II, and then the trauma that gets passed down, it takes generations to like actually
Yes,
even be able to
exactly,
see it.
exactly. So your grandma was from Poland, or?
You know what's funny? I just found out that I'm
Oh
part
wow.
Polish. I thought I was German because she, after the war, went to Germany, didn't say she was from Poland. And I think this is a story I've heard a
Yeah,
lot because they don't want to be
exactly. Yeah.
different, right? So I just found out I'm Polish and
Oh
German, which
wow,
I
yeah,
just thought I was
exactly. So
German.
that gives you
Yeah.
an example of like how it kind of fractures family, it fractures the ancestry. And so I think that's what we're going through right now, except it's happening in a different way. We don't have like bombs going off, but we have like psyops going off all the time.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, because we see on quote unquote both sides, which I hate that kind of idea, but it simplifies things. I see people getting really wrapped
Yeah.
up in fear, even if they're in tuned with the truth of what's taking
Yeah, because
place.
I think it is normal. It's not that we want to like overcome fear. It's an intelligent response to a dangerous situation. But we gotta also know that our health. We're all talking about health lately and like how to take care of our health. If you're in a stress response, no healing is taking place. You can't think clearly. So even if we are in a wartime, which I consider we still are, it is still up to us to deal with our stress responses as well. It's not helpful actually. And I know this for a fact because even the past couple of years, we had to move again. When we moved to where we live, I literally moved to a different country, and then this happened, and then we moved to a different city. We had to uproot our life. Like we had so many changes happening in our lives, which can be really dysregulating to your nervous system. Excuse me. That it took me some time to like, okay, I had to put in extra self-care, and I'm still catching up now, like even my husband and I, we go to like acupuncture every week. I do yoga, I meditate every day. Like I do a lot to actually keep my mental, spiritual, and emotional health like in a good place. But it's also because of the nature of the work that I do, I really have to make sure that I'm taking care of myself as well. And I think that fear is an intelligent response, but when we're operating in fear all the time, it's not intelligent anymore.
So well said. What would you tell somebody? And I know that you did a really great video saying that there's people who are just not going to see what's going on. But what would you tell someone who says like, how do you know you're in a psychological war?
The propaganda,
like, where's the proof?
like the lies in the media, like all these newspapers that I actually used to like because I was more left leaning for most of my life. It's just blatant lies. If you're a critical thinker, you can actually see in regular news, like New York Times, for example, this reputable newspaper, like literally spreading abject lies and propaganda. Never mind the fact that they're not even, you know, presenting an intelligent argument. It's personal attacks, it's smear pieces, it's like, you know, it's not even responsible journalism at this point, basically, to put it simply. So just the increase of propaganda, I think, is part of it. And it's also just intense division. It's like the vax against the anti-vax, the men against the woman, the black against the white people. It's like all over the place. And this is like, you know, the thing is if we are really dealing with like a communist, potentially communist government, their point is to destabilize society in multiple ways. So, I mean, I could be wrong, but if this isn't an information war, then I'm probably losing my mind right now. But I'm sure many of the people who canceled me think. But it is, it's just like I think all of us are in shock because, you know, a lot of us used to, you know, trust these institutions, you know, and we watched slowly as they kind of tilted into like arms of like left-wing propaganda. And it was like disillusioning for me to accept as well, because I was like, I can't believe this is happening, you know. But I think that what we're dealing with is just almost like it's been happening for years. It's just gotten worse in the past couple of years, you know.
Totally. How do you kind of like check yourself to know if you're in more in alignment with truth?
Like if something I say is true or not? Well, I don't know when I say it, to be honest. I mean, it comes from my heart, you know. I really make sure before I write anything, before I put anything out, is coming from a good place within me, that I'm not just doing it because I'm triggered or I'm angry or whatever, you know. So, and I don't know, because it changes, you know. I think that it's like Krishnamurti has this amazing quote that like truth is a pathless land. So we kind of follow the streams of like what we think is right throughout our life, but do we ever really get to the whole truth? Like, I don't think we do. It's a discovery, actually. It's a process of self-discovery. And in the back of my head, you know, when this was all going on, I mean, objectively, I knew that it's wrong to force a medication onto a population that's not been tested or whatever. I agree with that, with everything, not just the topic of that we're talking about, you know. But it's also, you know, I also have to be open to the idea of being wrong. I hoped I was wrong. I wished I was wrong, actually. In the back of my head, I was like, I really hope that this isn't the case and doesn't turn out as bad as I thought it would be. But that wasn't the case. You know, I've seen so many jab deaths. I mean, we're probably gonna get censored now, but you know, like I've watched people lose their family. It's like the evidence piled up, and actually a lot of the kind of it's called secondary trauma I had to deal with was dealing with all like the people who were losing family members, literally dying, or they wouldn't talk to them because of the agenda and the grief they were carrying, and like, you know, people in their 20s suddenly dying. Like it literally felt like, that's actually another example of being in a war zone. It's just like the amount of death that I've been subjected to in this past 6 months, year of our coaching programs is higher than I've dealt with in my entire life. It's like 5 times higher. Like it's crazy. So
yeah, and I have experienced that too, an injury where I've really asked myself, is this anecdotal, or is this I've questioned too, like, wait, is this just anecdotal? Is it like when you get a new car and you see the car? Yeah. Like I've really questioned that, but it's there's something going on.
The whole thing is like, this is like, so if it was a war, you know, and they were just putting off bombs and we saw kind of like the wreckage, it would be different. But since it's a psychological war, the psyche is only accessed through the intangible senses, basically. It's not like touch, hearing, sight, you know. It's just you sense like I'm being messed with, I'm being gaslit, you know. And so that's why it's so like it's such a mind fuck, because like there's no, like sometimes there's not like the physical proof that you need, but you just know. But the proof that we need actually is now coming up with all the injuries. I don't know if you are on Facebook, but there was this big group called Died Suddenly, which was just wiped off. It had hundreds of thousands of people. You would see like, you know, hundreds to thousands of like engagement on these posts. It was very popular. People just sharing relatives that they had been injured or died suddenly. And it's catastrophic, you know. It's like, this has been the hardest thing for me to deal with. I haven't even lost anyone in my immediate family, but the secondary thing of seeing it happen to so many people I know, coaching people who lost relatives, and like, it's been really intense, you know. Like, so we have to, this is why taking care of ourselves is critical. And I think that in many ways we have to we have to get into our emotional bodies and we have to feel what this was like for us, you know, and find little moments. Like I've cried a lot. I do like grief work, you know, because trauma is basically trapped emotion in the body that's not being released. So all of us, if we're stuck in fear, if we're looking for the next bad thing that's going to happen, it's actually a sign that we're carrying something within us that needs to be let go of.
Mm. And I've also noticed people, myself included at times throughout this, being like, okay, once this big piece of information comes out,
No.
people I love will wake up.
I know. It's like, I mean, it's,
you know, and
the
then
thing
it's the
is,
next
is
thing.
like, I think like, cause I've been like exiled. Well, not exiled. My family's actually spiritual. My family had like a guru and whatnot, but they're totally like leftist now. Like, don't think I'm crazy, like anti-vaxxer conspiracy theorist. But we don't like, I mean, the problem is that since it's a psychological war, they use our emotions and they weaponize our emotions against us. So it's, you have a better chance of reaching people if you can focus on the relationship, if you can focus on the connection between them. Because information alone, like the facts you give them doesn't hold up very well against all this psychological propaganda out there, unfortunately. So you can't convince them mentally, but you can get to them emotionally if they're, you know, the heart is still open, if they feel that connection. So I wouldn't recommend people trying to like wake people up on facts alone. But if you can somehow focus on the relationship, on the kind of feeling nature of your connection, that will potentially leave them more open. But it's also just, I mean, cognitive dissonance is really strong. Like it would be a big pill. I see people waking up after they took the jab or whatever. But for the people who are really stubborn, especially people who maybe in your family or your friends don't like to usually admit that they're wrong, this would be a big pill to swallow. Like it would, a lot of people, like, they have too many psychological defense mechanisms in the way of them acknowledging, like, whoa, like what just happened? Like that would be hard for me to swallow, even with my own, you know, like awareness, you know. So we also kind of have to have compassion, because if you present information to someone and they're not open to it, usually what's going to come up is defense mechanisms like rationalizations, projection, they'll get angry or whatever, you know. And that defense mechanisms are actually like protecting a very vulnerable, scared part of themselves, actually. So you want to honor the defense mechanisms, but ideally in a way that's not a way that's compassionate, is like try and speak to that little part of them that's really scared, rather than, you know, attack their defense mechanisms.
Yeah, like instead of poking at it, ideally
yeah,
coming from love
and
and
honestly, like
compassion.
it's probably not going to happen. Like I don't know. Like I begged my family members not to get it. I'm still worried about that. You know, my husband did the same with his family members. They still went ahead and did it. You know, so you can't convince people, because it's a consensus thing. Like I had this video went crazy viral, like how do I wake up my friends and family, right? Where I talked about evolutionary astrology, and I talked about the consensus state, the individuated state, and the spiritualized state. So the thing with so this is an evolution of consciousness that happens literally over lifetimes, right? And the thing with consensus people is that they have an unconscious security need in trusting the experts, in trusting the government, of trusting whatever the mainstream of where they live says is the correct answer will be their opinion. So they're not going to take on your own opinion and take that in. They might if they're starting to think for themselves already. You know, that's actually the marker you want to look for, is like, is this person capable of thinking for themselves? Because if they're not, then they find too much psychological, emotional security in being part of what everyone else is saying, that, you know, you're really working with this like level of the reptilian brain, basically, that seeks security. That's like, it's very hard to override, you know. And like the best you can do is like plant seeds, you know, maybe one day they'll get it. And I think we also have to kind of look on our attachment to like needing people to also think the same way as us, you know, like, because that approach doesn't seem to work either.
Agreed. I started reading some information about how most people would say that they want freedom, but when actually push comes to shove, a lot of people don't want freedom because it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And it's hard, you know. Like I was really outspoken asking people to like everyone to speak up, like in the like more last year when this was really heating up and the year before that, you know. But I'm also realizing that it was really stressful for us to do that. You know, I'm still paying a price for it now. I'm like super shadow banned on this main platform that I use to like spread my writing and my work out there. So I've had to pay a price for it, you know, but to me, it's been worth it because like to not listen to my conscience was like so much more like I would have much more trouble forgiving myself for that than to just get shadow banned on Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, I agree, because I was teaching media at a post-secondary, and it was like, I have to speak up. The pain of
Yeah,
not speaking up is now
exactly.
passing the pain of speaking
Oh,
up.
really?
Even though I got
Speak up to
fired and
the
stuff. It
kids
was
or?
worth it. I just went on social media because I was teaching my students in media, let's look for different perspectives, let's find the people stories, let's find the stories that aren't being told, which is apparently what the left is all
Yeah.
about. I would have leaned left too. But then I started saying, like, I think there's more to this. And I was very transitional. I wasn't being hyperbolic or harsh. And I wouldn't disclose my back status either. And then mandates came in. But I think it was mostly I just started speaking up online, and they didn't. I got deleted by other teachers, instructors who taught me. It was wild.
Did they actually like
So how do
meet
you?
up with you and be like, hey, you can't say this anymore or say anything about what you're posting?
No, like there was like, oh, there was like a just be aware conversation, but
Oh wow.
I was fired without cause because
So they
there is no
inspired you
reason
eventually
for them.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because you talk about being in the spiritual community and looking around and being like,
no.
why is nobody speaking up or seeing this?
More than
Yeah. And I feel that way in the media. I'm like looking around like, this is very obviously propaganda. Why isn't anybody
yeah.
seeing
I mean,
it?
I know a lot of people who actually lost their jobs for the same reason. And I think that if I were in a job like that, I would have also definitely lost my job too. I think I would have been like helping the kids though before I left. Okay, like, can you spot the straw man argument? Like, get them into like critical thinking. But yeah, I mean, it's been crazy because that's also another thing that's happened to so many people. Like a large amount of people have lost their jobs over this, and that's also been very hard on people, you know, especially people who have like worked their whole lives, like if they wanted to become a nurse or they've been teaching like you, and like all of a sudden they have to change. But it also brings me to another point is that, you know, when I was talking about this consensus, you know, the next stage is individuation. And ultimately, in individuation, you really have to find the true self, find what's unique about you, and then bring something new to the back to the consensus. So like, I think that a lot of people who maybe also lost their jobs, like it's really a call to individuation. It's like, no, like, was this really where you wanted to spend the rest of your life? Do you have other gifts you need to bring forward, you know? Because I see this almost like there's this collapse of like what I call like the Saturn establishments, like legacy media, academia, even mainstream education. Mainstream education, as soon as Uranus enters Gemini, which is not until I think 2032, but it's still coming, I think is going to go. Like, I think we're going to go down this whole alternative route. You already see it happening. So I think that, you know, the people who are individuating and finding their own path and kind of carving their own way right now, like we can make the new like world basically, you know, but we have to actually work and we have to get organized and we have to get driven, because it's so much, even my husband and I talk about this all the time, like it's so much easier in a way to like just go to a job and collect a paycheck and then like you just leave and then they take care of everything for you, you know. But when you really become your own boss or do your own thing, it's like you have to motivate yourself, you have to be organized, you have to do all this stuff, you know. So it takes almost like a certain amount of grit in a person to even do that. But the good side is that you get to make the rules. No one gets to tell you what to do. No one gets to tell you what you can and can't say. And I think that's the issue with being part of any Saturn establishment, is that, you know, they couldn't really cancel me from like any professional organizations, but that's how they cancel you, is like they cancel your licensing or they just blacklist you or whatever, you know. But if you become like uncancelable, then that's being like truly sovereign in your work. It's like, I don't belong to any organizations, institutions. You can't cancel me. I'm just doing my own thing. And I think that's really the route that a lot of us are being like kind of pushed to go down.
I totally agree. And I've been doing my own thing as well. So I feel really grateful for that for years, like partially in and out of the institution. But I think, as you said, I think the trust in the education systems is going to completely, it's already crumbling. And then you're making courses, I'm making courses, people are making courses now, and someone's going to trust you instead of an institution that can't even change or shift or improve as fast.
That's a good point, is that, you know, I'm sure you know in the school, you can't just teach whatever you want. You have to go through the curriculum. It has to be like approved or whatever. But like, I can like bring like cutting edge stuff that like, you know, I don't need anyone's permission. And there's definitely downsides of that. You know, like people are always talking about how the coaching industry isn't regulated enough or whatever. The regulation is not going to change things, because there's really crappy therapists out there as well. You know? It's like, who's going to regulate? You're going to let the government regulate this? It's like, do you really want to trust them with that? So I think we are entering into almost like this kind of like wild, wild west of like education and like training and whatever. And people, you know what I'm noticing as well is that people care more about your own kind of hero's journey, your embodied experience. Like, it doesn't matter how many like PhDs or letters someone has on their name anymore. It's like, can you actually help me? Can you actually deliver the things that I need? Have you been through the journey that I'm going through? Like, and can you help me get through it? Like, I usually help people who's like, I was at that point like a couple years ago or a few years ago or whatever, you know? So I think we're entering this whole new era. And honestly, like at this point, I think it's like more your soul that matters, your authenticity that matters, if you can actually deliver, you know, because I've met with people with like PhDs and all the letters after their names. I've gone to all these, you know, psychiatrists and psychologists. And honestly, I got helped the most by this elder medicine woman who lived at this intentional community I was living at before I moved in with my husband. No degrees, maybe like a weekend workshop, but all she does is do like sweat lodges, and she goes to rain dances, and like, you know, she's constantly immersed in like kind of, you know, spiritual practice. And she had this amazing wisdom, and she literally like fixed some of my perceptions about relationships in like 2 or 3 sessions. So like, to me, like I've had my most, and I'm not saying that I don't like, also if you have a therapist or a PhD or whatever, and I like disclude you, I'm just saying that I've had amazing results from people who had none of those credentials. So the credentials doesn't really matter to me as much anymore.
No, and I think if it's going back to that other theme, if we feel the need that we need a regulated system, it's because we're not trusting our own venturing into like choosing the people,
thinking,
right?
Discernment, you know, like if someone wants to work with us, for example, and they don't know us very well, because I know we have some like pretty controversial and out there views, even besides the V topic, but like we talk about occult forces and all sorts of other topics that maybe the average everyday person is not like ready for. I just get them to listen to our podcast and be like, you can listen to it, hear us out. Like, if you like us, great. If you don't, then it's no problem, you know? So, you know, since we are kind of entering this individuated era, we're going to actually have to be discerning, to be critical thinkers, and to be able to choose for ourselves, you know, rather than be like, oh, this is accredited by this, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's not going to matter as much anymore, because honestly, a lot of those institutions have also destroyed public trust by what the direction they've gone down, you know, like even some of the teachers that I've learned from and their views about the V and what they've said. Like one of the teachers I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to name him, but he put out an article. I went through a somatic kind of therapy program with him, and he put in an article that like people who don't want to get the V all have unresolved trauma. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about, right? Yeah, I trouble trusting him now.
Oh yeah,
he said that was insane to me. Like that was a total like malpractice of his application of trauma, actually. And in fact, I really saw the opposite. If I saw the trauma responses where it came from first, it was the people who were like masking up, and like, you know, if you put your mask down a little bit over your nose, they were like, you got to lift it up, and like you walk in a store and they go 3 feet away from you. Like that's a trauma response, you know. But back to the point is like, I think that a lot of people actually lost faith in these institutions. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this book called The Fourth Turning. It's like this famous book about cycles of time and history. I think it's by Neil Strauss or Neil Howe. Anyway, it's called The Fourth Turning, really famous book. And he talks about these kind of cycles of history. And he talks about the fourth turning, actually, which is the end of an era, which is the era that we're in now. He even matches up with his dates in that. And loss of trust in the public institutions is actually one of the signs, you know? And all of this kind of global chaos and uncertainty is actually the sign that we are at the end of an era, an end of an age.
It's interesting, just going back to that, you know, if somebody doesn't take the V, they're traumatized. I looked into this because someone was calling me narcissistic for not getting V'd. And so I actually did, like, I like dove deep. I'm like, hey, what are the characteristics and stuff? And I was like, I see the exact opposite. If you need me to do something so you feel better, that's like, that's total, that's living from disempowerment.
Be curious about the words that people call you, because it's actually their projection towards you says more about how they secretly feel about themselves than you. But then also, you know, this is also work we do in our program, is that like if a part of you kind of did the right thing by like looking up and be like, oh, am I narcissistic, rather than just being like, I'm not narcissistic. You know, we all have a narcissistic part within us, you know, we all have a self-interested part within us, but narcissism is kind of this spectrum, you know, where like you get to this total lack of empathy for other people. But you also want to check, you know, like I had to do this all of 2020, 2011, or 2021 rather. People call me like white supremacist, racist, right-wing, conservative, far right, I don't know, evil. Like I got called like literally every single name out the book. And it's hilarious that they call me a white supremacist because I'm like half Asian. I grew up actually around racism. I went through like a whole healing process with that. And then all of a sudden I'm like a white supremacist. And so I actually thought about it. I was like, is there a part of me? Like, cause like, you know, I'm kind of a very open person. I'm like, I consider things that people say. And I think that's actually valuable, then rather than just project and hate on them back, which is what they want, or whatever is kind of working through them wants. They want you to get angry. They want you to get pissed off. They want you to have a conflict. I actually reflected on it. It was like similar to you. I was like, no, I'm not actually.
You're like, but I love that you went there too. And I think that's what people, a really important message that you're getting at. Get curious and open and like self-reflect, but also there is a place where you get to like,
and
no,
honestly, like if you just like share a point and then someone just personally attacks you right out the gate, that's not a fair conversation. It'd be a different story if like someone sat you down and was like, hey, you know, we have this issue in our relationship. I'm noticing you're a little bit self-centered or whatever. But it's also, you know, it's a logical fallacy. It's like an ad hominem. Like that's like the most popular kind of comeback that people have when you have a different opinion, and just attack you personally, you know, rather than just look at what you said. They'll either make up a fake argument that you didn't make, a strawman argument, or they'll go to personal attacks right away. Like 99% of the conversations that happen online are like that.
Yeah, and it's like, you're not compassionate. You're like, it's like just the personal attacks, but with
and in
nothing
a weird,
attacking the
in a
content.
weird kind of like leftist ways, like you don't care about others, you're a grandma killer, like all of these things. And it's like, it's just, I mean, it's crazy. It's unfortunate too. Another thing about the propaganda that we mentioned is that it's also a sign of propaganda where you get the public repeating key words that you've repeated across all of the stations. And that was the main thing that I also saw in my family, is like, when I asked them why they wanted to get it, you know, they were just repeating things that literally CNN, NBC, whatever, were just saying, like literally almost word for word. And that's another sign of like someone either attached to the consensus or has fallen prey to brainwashing. They just parrot out like what other people said on the media, thinking that's their own thought as well.
Yeah, it is really fascinating. And then when you push them a little bit on it, there's the personal attacks that are right
because
at the
defense
surface.
Mechanism, like, you know, when a defense mechanism comes up and we like don't want to hear something, you know, there's a fight type who will just get angry at you. There's like a freeze type who will just like shut down or stonewall. And then there's the flight type who will just like walk away from the conversation. So people will show you their trauma responses in the way that they respond to these difficult conversations. And I have to say, like, just generally in the world, like people are not, we're not really skilled at like having hard conversations in general, you know? And there's definitely areas where it's more sensitive, like with family, where we have like history and all sorts of triggers with them, you know? but we don't even know how to have those conversations anymore, actually. I mean, if we were taught, this is also why I think the education system needs to change, because if we were taught like critical thinking and like how to construct an argument and how to reply to someone, you know, like kind of what they do in debate club a little bit, then we would be much better off. But we don't actually learn any of the skills we need for real life in school, really.
Yeah, and as when I started to get really good results with my students, it's because I created conscious work in the program. I was running the school newspaper. If media professionals don't do this shadow work, how can they tell stories
That's
of the world?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Foggy.
Exactly. No,
So
it's
been wild. Okay, I'm curious.
There, though, you know, like a lot of I mean, we have this kind of collective shadow too that's coming up, and I think it's unfortunate because I was actually in journalism from like 18 to like 21 or something, like a music journalist, you know, and I was just writing about bands I liked. But what actually turned me off from journalism was I could tell almost like what a game it was. And like, you know, you're nice to this band and they give you this good interview and you write something good. Like it's like a power game. Like it's about kind of like, you know, like, so you're basically kind of, there's an unspoken rule that you're not allowed to say the truth, that you need to kind of like play by the rules in order to become successful. And I was super turned off by that. I was like, I can't do this. It was like just crippling to me, you know? So I think that that's kind of also part of what goes on in the media as well, is like you have people who can write maybe, but they're being told what to say and even what to think about it. And it's not real journalism, actually. Like we don't have actually very many real journalists out there anymore. I know there's some channels kind of popping up, like alternative ones, which is great, which is also something that's going to have to happen as well. But like, you know, it's not even like it was, even in the 90s, I think we had way better journalism.
It was starting to crumble, but like when you're, I think as a journalist, if your guiding light isn't truth and exploration, if it's self-preservation and image, you're dead in the water. You can't
well, not a lot of people are interested in truth though in this world, unfortunately.
I'm curious your thoughts on you said on the podcast too, like there is an objective truth and then there's my truth. I'm curious your thoughts
there's like my
on
truth,
that,
which is like how I really feel about it, how I really think I could be wrong. And then there's like objective truth, like rooted in natural law, you know? Like, and so I think that both can be slippery to go down, you know, even to think that because I have like a lot of like universal spiritual truths, which I think are true, may not be the same for even my husband, you know? So I think it's like, it's a process of discovery, you know? But sorry, what was the first part of the question? You said there was objective truth. Oh, and my truth. Yeah, I think that's also the main thing, is that my truth is really just my perspective. Like, and I think all perspectives are valid. I think we should all share our perspectives openly without fear of like being attacked or whatever, you know? Everyone's perspectives are valid, but you don't get your own personal version of truth. You get your own personal perspective, but your perspective or your truth may not necessarily actually be objectively true as well, which I think is also how, how society is a little bit degrading, because it's all about subjective experience. It's all about your lived experience, my truth, which I think is valuable, you know, but it may not be the truth.
Yeah. And then I think there's trauma if you're living in a place where you get to express your perspective and anybody questioning it means a personal attack on you.
Sorry, I just cut out for a second. Can you just repeat that?
Oh, that's okay. I said, it's interesting. I find it really fascinating, and I'm sure I've done it, but where it's like, you're living in a place where it's like my truth, but nobody can question it. Then are you really seeking truth?
And it's also probably a very fixed perspective, because if you're really interested in truth, you have to have an open mind, and an open mind to being wrong, actually, you know, and that sucks. Like, there was a lot of things that I wish that I was wrong about, you know, that happened. And I hoped in the back of my head, like I was like, I got to say this regardless, because I couldn't go back in my home country. You know, there was real repercussions that I was experiencing that were really crazy to me, you know, but in the back of my head, I was hoping, you know, that there wasn't going to be a ton of death, that there wasn't going to be a ton of injuries, you know. So I think that even though I really felt that that was the true and was going to happen, I think we always got to leave room for that flexibility and open-mindedness, you know, Because if you're really interested in truth, you also have to be interested in other people proving you wrong, actually. But in a fair argument, like in a good faith argument, which is not common these days either.
Yeah, I love
Canada,
that. What's your home
actually.
country? Are you from Canada?
Oh yeah, are you
Oh,
in Canada right
yeah,
now?
me too. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'm from
Yeah,
a small
Edmonton.
town called
Yeah.
Thunder Bay in Ontario. I haven't been back there in a long
Oh,
time though. I was last
it's a
living
beautiful
in
town.
Vancouver, which is on the west coast.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So many good Canadians. Which is interesting too, because there's that whole politeness, and as you know, like I couldn't fly in the
I
country
know.
for
I just
most of
yeah,
this year,
I
so
can
that
just
was why.
re-enter after like a year and a bit.
It's so crazy. Okay, you've alluded to like the psychological war. I just want to ask. Some people are saying this is spiritual war as well. What's the difference
So
between
yeah, that's a good
psychological and a
question.
spiritual war?
Well, like it all, spiritual war is more because in my view, this is the end of a materialistic age and we're entering into a more spiritually based age. We live in the age of materialism. That's why the mantra is trust the science, trust the experts, not trust your intuition, not trust God, not any of that. It's about trust materialism, trust science. So, you know, since we are, the spiritual war is more, they're trying to disconnect us from that inner guidance. They're trying to disconnect us from a relationship with a higher power, you know? But I also think that every single physical war starts in the spiritual dimensions and then slowly works it down in the material. So any physical war is also a spiritual war as well. So that's one aspect of it, but it's also spiritual war, meaning that like, are we going to make it? I don't know, you know, like we're going to enter Pluto in Aquarius, which is a really pivotal turning point for humanity. Then we're going to enter into Pluto in Pisces, and we have a chance to figure this out and to move society in a different direction, which actually includes our connection to God and nature and spirit, which I think needs to come back as a necessity. Or we're going to drift into this like transhumanism, AI based reality, which is still going to be part of it. You know, technology is also just neutral, it can be used for good or evil as well. So, you know, I think I had this tweet that was really popular, like when you're in a spiritual war, your connection to the divine is your greatest weapon, meaning, you know, your connection to your own higher power is your greatest weapon. That will connect you to your intuition. It will help you make decisions. It will connect you with your soul purpose. It will connect you with your conscience. You know, it can even bring you more ease and flow in life. You know, a lot of us struggle because we are disconnected from a higher power. And I think that anchoring that higher power within ourselves, and you know, for some people that sounds very abstract, so you just want to think of it as like connecting to your own heart. Like, am I open? Am I compassionate? Am I loving? You know, am I really living my life in a way that feels emotionally fulfilling for me? You know, because a lot of people, I think, even people, maybe people like yourself, like they got kicked out of jobs that were like draining their souls, like not right for them, not like lighting them up, you know. And so I think that we really need to connect with something higher beyond the earthly realm to almost like even anchor the extra power we need to like push out of this, you know? Because like I'm of the perspective that like with a connection to God or the divine, a lot of things that maybe were impossible before become possible, you know? And that's really how we win. If you ever heard of David Hawkins' work, he has this book called Power versus Force, you know? Is that they're using force, manipulation, fear, control, everything in a lower frequency range, under 200 was his map. But we actually need to access courage, acceptance, like true love, you know, all of these virtues as well. And that's more powerful than force. So like, you know, even I forget the number, but like, you know, someone with like a bit of a higher frequency has the ability to impact more people, right? So what they're working with is, I hate to use these kind of new age terms, but it's true, like low vibrational energies, you know, like fear, control, shaming people. All of that is really low energy, and it actually has way less power than courage. Like courage, I think, is at like 500 or something, you know? So we are more powerful and we have the ability to make more of a change the more we're connected to our true power as well.
Yes, I love that. And what I'm passionate about is I think we get disempowered sometimes in a scroll trying to validate, even if we know the truth. And I'm really passionate about helping people take action, whatever that unique
Yeah,
way for
exactly. And
them
I think that's
is.
also a trauma response too. Like when things are uncertain in the world, like we seek certainty by like, okay, just got to find out what's going to happen next month and like what's going to happen with the food supply and blah, 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 you know. It's a way that we seek security as well, you know. But I was caught in that more in like 2020 and 2021 because I didn't know what was going to happen. There was like elections in the US, it was like bananas, you know. But, you know, we got to tune into our bodies and be like, am I doing this as a way of checking out? And how is this media even affecting my body? You know, like even in our course, we recommend that people go on diets, like social media diets, internet diets, because that stimulation is so bad for your brain long term. Like even a simple thing like not checking your phone the first hour in the morning, I think is really critical to your mental health. And not to say that I always don't do that. I always do that, you know, but because if you wire your brain first thing in the morning to be seeking dopamine, it's like this automatic behavior, you know, and we have all of these kind of like automatic behaviors running that actually does take a little bit of willpower to really stop. So even with myself, like if I'm scrolling on like, you know, social media or whatever, and I'm feeling like shit, I like check in with my body. I'm like, okay, I got to take care of myself, you know, because our health is key right now as well. It's really important we take really good care of our stress levels.
So true. Okay, this is one of my favorite questions. What is the biggest lie you
Hmm.
once believed? I ask this of
I'm
everybody.
probably gonna say something very controversial. I was really so I was raised by like a feminist. And I was also raised, I spent a lot of time around a lot of hardcore feminists, and I didn't identify as one, but I was really against like railing against the patriarchy and like hating on men and like etc. You know. So I believed for a long time that men were bad and they were not there to help me, that they were just power seeking, they had unfair power and they were just terrible or whatever. And that was probably the biggest lie that I believed, that men and women aren't there to help each other. And that was actually fueled by my own father issues. It was fueled by my own unhealed trauma. It was also fueled by cultural stuff. But I think about that often because I think that, you know, if you're a woman, appreciating the men in your life who are trying to help you will make your life a lot easier, actually, you know? So I think that's probably the biggest. Yeah, there's good men out there. Exactly. And actually, men become good the more that we appreciate them for their goodness rather than being like, we need to equalize the power and we need to like, you know, be equal. Like you're not equal to a man. You have actually better skills than a man and a man has better skills than you. It's unequal by nature. But I think that appreciating men and even appreciating men in positions of power, you know, which I was really against before I was like, kill billionaires and etc., you know, has been a game changer for me because I think it's part of, I think, you know, as I mentioned, this kind of spiritual war we're in, we are returning to some sort of natural order. And I think that there's beauty in masculine and feminine dynamics.
I totally agree. What do you believe now specifically? That there's beauty, I guess you just said, that there's
Yeah,
beauty
what do I
in the
believe about that
differences.
topic? Yeah, I think that, you know, they're really
Yeah.
trying to destroy the family. You see that? Like how many people's families have turned against them, you know? And I think that one thing that will help us, you know, a lot of people are looking for their tribe and community, etc. That can be important too, but it's you also don't want to like lean on that. But there's something that having, you know, I think we really underestimated how important relationships are to us and really like soul-based like relationships where you can be who you truly are with that person, you know. So I think that we need to look at that and we need to look at our relationships and we need to like look at the people in our lives because, you know, especially when we get into wartime periods like this, you know, relationships are essential to our survival. And like I think that, you know, we have so many psyops that are anti-relationship out there right now, men against women, never mind all the other stuff going on, you know, that we need to figure out a way actually how to make our relationships stronger because it will help us in times of war because they're going to try and displace all of us, they're going to try and disconnect all of us in multiple ways, you know, and it's going to be up to us to actually improve them and make them better. And the man against woman thing is actually one of the
I love
key
that.
ways of doing it.
It's true. It's true. And messing up,
Yeah,
as you said, relationship. Is there anything else you feel like you need to say? I
No,
love this
that's it. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, if anyone watching, we also do have a relationship masterclass coming up. It's called, you can sign up at, let me check it.
Yeah, sorry. I should have asked. How can people engage with you? The Cosmic Matrix podcast is fantastic. I started listening to it
on Spotify, on Instagram, or not on Instagram. Sorry, we do have an Instagram as well on my page. If you want to follow me, I mean, you can probably just see me on this on your screen, but you're gonna have to type in my full name and watch out for the spelling, because I have all these fakers who come up first now because I'm being shadow banned. And yeah, we have a relationship masterclass coming up, which is evolutionaryrelationshipsnow.com. But if you go to my Instagram, it's linked in there, and it's literally going to be actually tomorrow or Thursday. It's going to be on Thursday, so you don't have that much time to sign up.
Do you want to just give a little summary, because I think that's probably super powerful.
Let me basically, it's myself, my partner, and we're going to have a relationship psychotherapist as well, helping us facilitate too. And essentially, some of the topics we're going to get into is how you can use relationships as a path of evolution, how to attract, create the relationships that you want, why do you keep being attracted to partners who aren't right for you, what to do when your partner is waking up and another isn't, very popular topic these days. We're also going to talk about trauma bonds and occult forces in relationships. We're going to talk about divine union, so this higher state of relationships, which we actually see emerging right now. We're going to talk about how to navigate conflict in relationship and communication skills. So we get into the esoteric and the spiritual, but what we do in our work is we really bring it down to earth, and how can you actually apply this to your relationships now? And this is open to single people in relationships. And it also has tools that apply to all relationships. So family, friend relationships, it also has stuff in it for that.
And I seriously got goosebumps as you're talking about it, because I think, as you were alluding to and talking about, this is what's so important. We have to fight the divide.
And unfortunately, the people who are maybe listening to this were a little bit more conscious, that actually becomes your responsibility. If you're the one who can see what's going on, you also have the responsibility to do what you can to repair it as well.
Yeah, it's so true. This was such a great conversation, Laura. Thank you so much for doing this.
You too.
Have a great day. See ya.